the 12th of July, 2022. Hi, everybody. I'm Dana Durnford. We got Kevin Blanche is supposed to be in the tide zones today. He's got some videos up at his YouTube channel. Just a quick introduction. We're going to give him a call. Let's see if we can get up to speed on that. Now, he's in the tide zones in California because of radioactive fallout from Japan's multiple nuclear reactors melting down 11 years ago. This stuff never goes away and nobody's safe from it. No species, everything with replicating cells are vulnerable to it. The bizarre company known as IAEA, also known as International Atomic Energy Agency, the promoters of nuclear, like Madame Curie, these people, she was doing science. They're just evil. There's a big difference, right? She lost both of her hands. Couldn't even wipe her own bum. And the nuclear industry celebrates it like it's yesterday. In fact, her laboratory in France is still too contaminated. They still can't decommission that. So there's a study tonight, and we're going to call Kevin here in about 2 minutes and see if he's available. The material footprint of nuclear energy far smaller than fossil fuel, on par with renewables. Well, first off, all nuclear power plants need 2 external power plants dedicated to them just to run. They can't run on their own energy. These nuclear power sites are the size of cities. And when they break down, they cover the whole planet in very harmful emitters that last millions of years, pulsing energy at the speed of light, invisible plumes covering the entire planet. Gas, oil, and coal emission, by the way, don't have those attributes. Gas, oil, and coal emissions only go about 50 miles. You've been hoodwinked by a vicious, spineless, heartless industry. Former Prime Minister of Japan says the evacuation from Fukushima could have reached 50 million people. Well, it was supposed to be at least 50 million of the 125 million people. What they done was they hid the radioactive fallout speedy maps that were paid for by the people of the country. The industry that they put in place to protect them in case of an event, when the event finally happened, those were the people that were out stabbing everybody on the planet in the face with radiation. I'll show you how academic journals actually work. Scientific journals accept fake studies about Star Wars. Information overload fuels fake news studies. They're creating studies and publishing it with no checks and balances to suit whatever the flavor is of the second anywhere on the planet. Major publisher retracts 100 studies about cancer because they're fake peer reviews. The lowest of lows, right? Guess again, they can go a lot lower than that. Retraction note to multiple articles in tumor because of fake academic studies. So how many people took those original studies as face value and were paid a deadly price from it? Phony peer review, the more we look, the more we find. It almost seems like every one of them are fake, don't it? We've covered thousands, tens of thousands of studies. Fake peer review hits the journals, paging Dr. Frauds, the fake publishers that are ruining science. China has to crack down on fake peer-reviewed studies. Hacking the scientific publication process. No, it's completely out of control. It's completely out of control. that's reactor 3. The remains of it. It's supposed to be 190 feet high. So they put this structure on it, around it. It doesn't physically touch the remains of it. It's just a stump, right? This is a reactor mixed oxide fuel facility. They built this offsite, brought it in there, and then pretended that they were in the fuel pool. This structure is 170 feet high. This structure is probably 40. So they faked a pool that doesn't exist, and they're not even in it. This is when they built it somewhere else, these pictures were from. They done the same thing with reactor 4.
I don't understand.
They pretend they're in fuel pools on top of a building that doesn't even exist. The fuel pools will be at the very top of the building. It doesn't even exist. And here's media worldwide pretending.
My understanding is on top of what you...
So how do you have a conversation when they're doing stuff like that? When they're faking 2 reactors that are completely disappeared, claiming they're perfectly normal. Why would all the media take a chance and do something like that? We should hang around because it's pretty important. Let's give Kevin a call, see if we can get Kevin Blanche. Kevin's been down doing tidal zones, checking to see if there's any species left for quite a few years. And I've seen James Lucid in comments saying it's pretty dismal. It's pretty dismal. That's not reassuring. Let's call Kevin, see if he's available. Hup. Paging Kevin.
Hello.
Hi, Kevin. It's Dana. Are you busy?
Yeah, I'm just getting out of here. Can you give me ball in 15 minutes?
Okay. Or you can call in if you want to, or do you want me to call you?
Call me in 15 if you would.
Okay, I will so. We'll see you in a bit.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, you're welcome. Bye-bye. Yeah, another 15 minutes. Let's set the timer for that. Because we got so much to cover. 15 minutes goes by pretty quick. 1-5, counting down. So, this is, for those who've been around here quite a bit, this is not unusual. We're going to talk about the fake studies. So, where's that headline to? The nuclear footprint of nuclear energy far smaller than fossil fuel, on par with renewables. Here's an interesting fact about just a single site. The estimate is going to cost at least $700 billion more to clean up Hanford, which is 585 square miles of a nuclear wasteland that's hemorrhaging radiation into the environment where it floats around the world looking for victims. So how much renewables could we, and pumped compressed air storage and pumped hydro storage and geothermal tidal energy, wind and solar, could we create with $677 billion, I wonder? Quite a bit, I would imagine. But that's just a fraction. They burnt through that already trying to clean that site up. And there's no way that's not going to be enough. We've seen speakers saying they'll bankrupt America and you still couldn't clean up Hanford. Because the Columbia River is taking a lot of it far, far away. Now multiply that by the Los Alamos and WIP and everything else, and you'll get a hankin', hopefully. The first study of its kind, Dana. Well, they made a few simple mistakes. Let's try to get through it the best we can, eh? Researchers conducted a rigorous analysis of entire life cycle of nuclear power, Unfortunately, they didn't. Not just greenhouse gases. Nuclear is greenhouse gases, for goodness sakes. Oil, gas, and coal emissions don't cover the planet in plumes. Pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second. So you got gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas floating around, pulsing energy, hitting each other, changing direction almost at the speed of light, because they don't mix with each other. And that causes a brutal X-ray effect upon the planet. It sterilizes the birds, the insects, the bacteria, the fungus gets wiped out in all your ground and forest. All your pollen is radioactive. The pollinators can't survive in that environment. This model is France's model of Fukushima radioactive fallout, based on venting, not based on the actual nuclear meltdowns. Try wrapping your mind around it. That's 16 days. So gas, oil, and coal emissions probably go 50, maybe 100 miles in strong wind. Carbon is good for plants, by the way, and insects, and bacteria, and fungus, and everything that has replicating cells. Nuclear is lethal to everything with replicating cells. Nuclear fallout is the only fallout that immediately captures the planet in an invisible cloak of the atomic plague. The first study of its kind. Personally, they've studied nuclear more than all natural elements in the solar system and Earth combined. Nuclear elements are not created by the sun or the solar system. That's why we call them man-made. See? Nuclear power is not just a low-carbon energy source. It takes a lot of nerve to come out and say something like that, because it's so blatantly untrue. They spent 30 years just dumping it into the ocean. Quite a few countries, but Britain was evil. What Britain done was evil. It was unbelievably evil for 30 years. Just driving around throwing nuclear waste off the side of their ships. But a low resource energy source, this is badness. Water from this well is not safe to drink, or any of these wells. This is just a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent of water they have contaminated in this nuclear industry, with a total environmental impact per kilowatt hour similar to that of renewables, said nobody but a crazy person. Well, you can't have nuclear weapons without nuclear power plants. Nuclear weapons are still out there, so if you don't put that in the equation, then you're a big liar. All these little dots there's just a fraction of 55,000 missile silo sites that they had at one point, and then just America, not counting Russia and the Soviet Union, China and Pakistan and India and everybody else, where they put their nuclear weapons in the communities and then use the communities as human shields. So if the opposite guy attacks one of these missile silos, they're not going to say in the media, hey, they just attacked one of our Minutemen silos. No. They're going to say they attacked a little community in nowhere, in the middle of nowhere. And later on, they'll say that happened to have, a nuclear launch pad. Using all of these communities for human shields. Lugging all this radioactive material through all these communities, and everything is vented all the time. How can you move all that nuclear material and set it up there for decades and not have radiological releases? Because you can't, see? It's absurd. Again, that's just a fraction of the... It's just a fraction. There's nothing. It doesn't really scratch the surface of that topic. Past life cycles, analysts of nuclear power have mostly focused on Energy consumption. All nuclear power plants need 2 external plants to power them. To build them, to power them for their life cycle, and to 60 years to decommission. Not that they can decommission these things. They can pretend they're decommissioning them. Call Kevin in another 7 minutes. Greenhouse gas emissions with building. United Kingdom is currently building Hinkley Point, which is what you're looking at. This is a massive site. Every piece of scrap of material is tripled, inspected by 3 individual companies. Only the best of the best of the best will go to the site. 90% of it will be bombarded with neutrons and will be nuclear waste forever, getting rid of all these precious metals and resources for a single use. It's the biggest construction job in the history of the United Kingdom. Very tiny footprint, obviously. It's the biggest construction job in the history of the United Kingdom. Just in cement alone, they can build a sidewalk, double-wide sidewalk to Rome. Oh, and with just only the best of the best cement on top of that. So it's actually a lunatic industry. If you investigate nuclear, the first thing you do is like, oh my God, these people are monsters. These are actually goblins. These are vicious scum. And look in the background, what do you see? Farms. All the fuel pools are going to be hemorrhaging, radiation. And where's a lot of that going to land? It's going to land in the farms. Who's going to eat that? Everybody at the supermarkets. What's going to happen to them? That's just a fraction of a fraction, by the way, of the emissions is going to land there. The heavy stuff is going to land right there. They build these things in farmland specifically to move the radiation away from the site so they don't have a big bioaccumulation footprint. And to poison people. It's purposely to poison people. Coal, gas, and oil plants don't have those attributes, by the way. Anything is better than nuclear. Anything. And greenhouse gas emissions associated with building, operating, and decommissioning a nuclear power plant. Each reactor needs 4,500 tons, 1 million gallons every minute just to keep it cool. It's boiled, not to keep it cool, but to produce energy. It's boiled off. And each glass of water, typically salt water, would normally have 1 billion creatures in it. Eggs and larvae, and a very soup of life, by the way, per glass of ocean water. And 80 to 100 million of those little creatures per glass would be the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. So 16 million times 1 billion creatures are boiled off up to stacks every minute in 440 reactors worldwide. Do your math on that. Decommissioning nuclear power plants. Did I mention they all need 2 external power plants just to run? Just to build them, dedicated to run them, to run these massive sites. Just to build out massive sites, you gotta have at least 2 external power plants. Then keep those same plants to run it for its whole lifespan, plus 2 gas, oil, coal plants for 60 years, 100 years to decommission it. Not that you can really decommission these things. It's too late, right? You just... The fuel pools are going to hemorrhage into those farms 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year at an absurd amount because there's no containment around the fuel pool. It's actually the definition of genocide. How are we doing here? Another 3 minutes. This isn't a total picture of environmental impact or sustainability. What was missing was a more comprehensive look at all the resources extracted from the earth. So they're trying to distract you from the real issue, which is the pollution. And don't get me wrong, we'll get into that. But the big issue is the releases and the fact that these places are surrounded by farms. So they have huge, massive equipment. They dig massive mines to get a little tiny bit of material. They use chemical ponds to separate it or evaporate it into the communities. Gas, oil, and coal don't have those attributes. If your gas, oil, and coal plants break down, you're not going to have 3 million children requiring treatment permanently. And they're not going to die prematurely if your gas, oil, and coal plant. A lot of these helicopters were only used once. If your gas, oil, and coal plant breaks down, you can use the helicopters for their normal lifespan. Material footprint of nuclear energy is far smaller than fossil fuel power, says the crazies. This is a plutonium dispersal of 239, by the way, the worst of the worst. Plutonium plumes covering the entire planet. On par with renewables. If your coal, oil, and gas plant breaks down, you're not going to see a headline that says, deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction around the world. No, that's reserved for nuclear. Do you think that headline is a joke to the people, my detractors? So then they, like everything has these, this is more carbon intensive than gas, oil, and coal, but everything has a certain amount of refining to it, right? They're pumping nuclear waste directly into the ocean. They're dumping it directly into the ocean. We're still splitting the atom, destroying the ecosystem by saturating it. And these barrels will go down in 6,000 meters, 2,000 pounds per square inch, and it'll just crumble, implode when it hits the bottom. And they know that. It's so bad they're actually dropping it on people that are protesting it. Japan picked up 60 million one-ton bags. 60 million. 60 million. They probably buried 1 trillion barrels worldwide of radioactive waste by the 60s. Like if you talk about the nuclear bomb testing, I'll mention that coming up. Don't even get it talking about the abandoned uranium mines. Just in Navajo's 15,000 of them. Let's give Kevin Blanche a call, see if we can get lucky. Get a report in from Ground Zero.
Hello?
Yeah, hi Kevin. Are you busy?
No, I'm good.
Good stuff. So you got some videos up. I guess over the next few days, you're...
We'll have a lot more, because when I first got here, the tide didn't get real low today, as low as we thought.
Right,
so
sure.
It's going to be low the next few days.
Yeah.
But I did get out there, and I got, I was out there before I shot videos, blah, blah, blah. And I talked to the Rangers, both Rangers. And the one Ranger, I talked to her, and I'm like, tell me this. I says, we ran open for almost 2 months now, a month and a half. I says, have you found anything, any starfish? She says, oh, no. I said, not one starfish? She says, there's nothing. It's deader than hell. And I says, what have you found? She says, I found one brittle star. I says, brittle stars are insects. She says, I know. And so I'm like,
wow.
Wiped out. She says, all I saw was erosion. And I says, you're here every day, right? Yeah. So then the other ranger, who's an older guy, probably about my age, he brought it up, not me, because he recognized me, because I'm out there all the time over the years.
Yeah.
And he's like, what about Fukushima? And we had quite the long conversation.
Wow.
He says, all the establishment, he says, that I deal with and whatever, they're in complete Fukushima denial. And he says, tell me, Kevin. And I'm like, well, come on. 3 full blown out meltdowns, 6 full blown, and you're telling me there's no byproduct for that? And he says, and I said, you watched these tide pools collapse in 2012? And he says, yeah, they collapsed. I've been here for years and years. And I said, so you're going to chalk that up? And he says, no, I'm not. And, and I'm like, he says, what about the establishment, the marine biology establishment? Has any of them jumped on Fukushima yet? And I said, no. He said, God, it's hard for me to believe and wrap my mind around. And we had quite the conversation right as they were closing.
Wow.
So,
that's encouraging.
Well, it's very telling. The conversation I had with her, that's, and then I did get in, I didn't get all the way out. I didn't completely expose the entire reef.
Sure.
But what I did see, it changed in 2.5 years. It got worse. Deader than dead.
It's actually...
And you're talking one of the most famous tide pools in the world. I mean...
No color whatsoever.
Nothing. Zero. I couldn't believe it. I could believe it, but
did you see
it's
any,
gotten worse.
Did you see any birds at all? There had to be a few birds hanging. Yeah, there had to be a few birds. Seagulls, local, residential.
The seagull counts are way down here. And, so yeah, there ain't shit.
Was there any mussels? Did you see any mussels?
What's that?
Did you see any mussels?
Very few teeny bad-looking mussels.
That's what I was going to say. They're very small. And the same thing with barnacles, very small.
Hardly any barnacles. And I also, got on the bottom of the Crystal Pier today. So there's a guy here. The last place I found any starfish, and I didn't find, there was nothing.
Well, there's supposed to be 84 species of starfish. Each species will come in multiple bright colors. There's supposed to be around 80 species or 78 species of sea anemones. And each species comes in multiple colors, and you get them up to 2 or 3 feet sizes. They're very visible. There should be 700 algae, 700 different types of kelp. And in that 700 kelp would be 5,500 species of invertebrates without the backbones. There should be around 70 species of sponges along that coastline. There should be all kinds of snails and whelks and clams and oysters and gooey ducks.
Which there was until 2011, 2012. All that existed here. And I've been in these tide pools as a little kid. I was telling the ranger, I says, in 2010, I found a California crimson that was, the diameter easily was 3 feet.
That's right, yeah.
Just a monster beast. And, the ochres are the big, thick ones. I found a few bat stars in here. But out there, the purple ochres, the California crimsons, whatever. I mean, the things can be up to 5 inches thick. Just beasts. And like I said, the color, you don't have to be a marine biologist, you don't have to be an expert. You can just see the color will just jump out at you.
Right.
And the thing that is telling is the Upper California purple urchins. Upper California purple urchins used to just blanket the top of these, so-called tide pools and reefs like carpets. I mean, and they're just a little purple fuzzy, and there are none.
Nothing.
Zero.
Yeah.
Completely gone.
And you would see them all the way down to 900 feet.
Oh, yeah. And it's still lower than I hear people talking, divers that say see some.
No.
I've always been, the canary is the Upper California purple urchin, really is because they're the most delicate.
Well, like if I took a plow, I didn't mean to cut you off, but if I took a plow and plowed in a typical beach, all the creatures would just crawl up from deeper water and fill up the gap right away because it's prime real estate. And Kevin's saying, folks, that it's completely naked. If you see a single starfish, it's a miracle. Wow.
Again, I talked to the young ranger out there. First thing when I got there, I tried to get her to do an interview with me, and she wouldn't. But anyway, and I talked to her. I said, you been here every day since they opened? And she says, yep, since the real. I says, what's changed out? The only thing that's changed is we've had some serious erosion over here that wiped out a big old piece of it. But I says, well, what about life? And I says, have you seen any starfish? First words out of her mouth, not one. Not a single one.
That's considered impossible, by the way, but that's... You've seen this year after year after year now, right? You've been able to prove for sure they don't exist.
The only starfish that I find in Southern Cal, I found, those ones last year on the bottom of the Crystal Ferret Superlow. The only ones I found.
Right, I remember that. Yeah, I remember you talking about that.
But and then at Lover's Point in Pacific Grove, I found a few. But as far as the tide pools per se, they're wiped out. And I'm in all these. I'm right here at PB Point right now. And PB Point, which is one of the great tide pools in the world, me and Peter was just talking about. I grew up right here, and that's where we learned about tide pools when we were little kids. This thing was so vivid that they are completely dead. I never seen anything so dead. And they've been dead since 2012, and I've been documenting. I have all my videos are right there. I've heavily documented it's a historic low tide. And so it's right there in front of God and everybody to see. But yet the whole world is in denial.
When I first started going down on the beaches, like you, we were attacked for just going down on a beach. We were viciously attacked. But I did have quite a few people that reached out to me and said they went down to prove me wrong. And they were shocked all the species were gone where they were too. I think it was around 25 at least people that had told me that story.
Yeah, same with me. I remember this woman called me and she says, I'm a California science teacher and so is my husband. And we thought you were so full of shit. We thought you were crazy, blah, 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 this and that. She said, so we spent the summer with our 2 children and we worked the tide pools all up and down. And she says, I owe you the unbelievable apology. I thought you was crazy. They are wiped out just like you said.
Yeah, because they used to take their kids down, see? They used to take their kids to the beach. And, and they were doing it every year after year. And then the kids move out. And then they come across people like us and we're like, that's not true. I had so many
It's such a radical freaking change. People can't wrap their minds around it.
Yeah, it happened over a couple of years, right? It took a few years probably 3 years, 4 years for it to totally disappear.
Well, they started to collapse. I got cancer in 2011. I was here on the beach when they picked up. I was right here in San Diego when they picked up the cesium-137 in the tuna. I was here fighting with the Stony Brook guy. I was here and going crazy about Fukushima, going nuts. And so I was looking at tide pools then, and the tide pools started to really collapse in earnest late in 2011. And they wiped out. And
yeah, it was noticed worldwide, right? There was a lot of reports worldwide right away that this was happening.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the Pacific Rim. Here on the Pacific Rim, and on the Pacific side, on the Fukushima right coast, I call it, which is our left coast. And you was up there documenting in 2012, 13, I was. And then, of course, I got cancer in 2011, so I missed my documentation in 2012 because of a bone marrow transplant center. But I got right back at it in 2013. And then when I got back at it in 2013, my videos in 20... And then, of course, I walked the entire coast in 2014 and 15.
It was long gone by then, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I walked from Mexico to San Francisco. And, and I didn't have a cell phone all the time. I was dying of cancer. And, but it was stunning to me up and down. I was like blown away how wiped out it was. And here we are in 2022, and it's still wiped out. And the establishment community is still in denial and saying mystified, baffled, stumped, and they're just going on with it.
Yeah, it didn't recover. For people not are unfamiliar with this, there was 7,500 highly visible species, and Kevin's there today in prime territory, and
oh boy,
they're lucky to find a little tiny starfish. My goodness,
we're gonna find nothing. We can't, not one single. And again, the ranger. We're talking at Point Loma State Park. It's been closed for 2.5 years, and we get out there, and the ranger tells me not one And then I seen what I needed to see, you know, and I'll get in these other tide pools the next 3-4 days, and it's so crowded down here with the tourism economy, it's nuts. So I'm in my sleeping bag, sleeping on the beach, because these rooms are $300-$400 a night. I mean, because it's just, these tourism economy just ruined coastal California. But I need to get it, you know, because I know better to stay out of here in July. But the tide is low right now because we got the full moon, and I want to get this, you know, because it's been closed for 2.5 years. It's important historical stuff that I'm there, you know, and so I got to do what I got to do, you know. I mean,
no, that's documentation. That's the final word.
Yeah.
When you go there and it's not there, that's not an opinion, that's not a conjecture, that's a fact. And when you do it year after year and you don't see a recovery.
No, there is no recovery. I mean, and people say, well, I find some.
Yeah,
very
that's
very,
right.
very few. Up there at Lover's Point, I found some okras. You know, I found some okras on the Crystal Pier, but we're talking less than 1%. You know, and I use the word genocide. I've never used the word extinction, but you know, it looks like to me it's probably extinction on a lot of stuff.
It's an extinction,
You know,
yeah.
Yeah, because you know I always go back to the Upper California Purple Origin because I know how delicate and how important they are. They're like carpet.
Those high tide lines, there should be around 30,000 different insects that would thrive in that 10, 12-foot zone.
And it's such color, such beautiful, incredible color. It
Amazing.
just jumps out to you and glares at you.
It was just well, that's what made it magic, right? Was this incredible diversity. Everything was touching each other. There was nothing. There wasn't a millimeter of real estate left in that tide zone.
There's nothing. It's unbelievable. I mean, again, and you know, closed for 2.5 years, so don't blame it on foot traffic. You know.
Yeah, well, what happens, even if foot traffic was to do some damage, the creatures from 5-10 feet below the low tide line would just fill in that gap within days in a normal, healthy environment, see? Because you get lots of wild animals will go down and walk, right? And they do more damage than a human would, see? The environment can sustain it.
You know, the same ranger who's known me for 15, 20 years, he's there. And I'm like, God, I'm glad to finally see some fucking work out of you because he was digging a post hole. So they were getting ready to close. And I walked over, and he walked up to me. He's like, Blanche. He says to me, he says, I've been out in that tide pool forever, you know, documenting. He's like, tell me the real story on Fukushima. I never said the word Fukushima. I don't even have my Fukushima shirt on today. Not my hat or nothing. And he's like, tell me. I said, well, come on. You got 3 full core meltdowns. You got spent fuel pools that are pushing into this ocean, and you think there's no byproduct for that? And we're going to chalk this up points, and then I brought up the salmon count. I said, we have empirical data now because of the salmon count. We don't count every single starfish. We count every single salmon. And empirical data, you can run regressionary models, and they collapse. And the smoking gun is the Chinook salmon go to sea for 5 years. They had record returns in 2013, 14, 15, and they went off a cliff just down 90-something percent starting in 2016. So you throw that in symphony with the tide pool work,
and
the scientist says, how do you deny it?
It's all the species, every species.
Yeah, right.
All the birds are showing up emaciated. All the whales are emaciated. Seals and sea lions are emaciated.
All the dead whales are washing up, starving up. The bottom line is it's hard to get an empirical number on whales. It's hard to get an empirical number on starfish. Empirical data matters. But we count every salmon because we use sonar. It's such a commodity.
Oh, it is, yeah.
So we have the empirical data.
We do so.
Empirical data matters as a PhD. You know, and that's why I went on this PhD.
The tourist industry is huge for salmon, man. It's huge. It's billions and billions and billions of dollars a year for just sports fishing.
How much does it cost to go into those tide pools, Peter? So the pass is $35 to go into those tide pools. You see the cars lined up.
Wow.
The cars, because you get onto the San Diego tourism website, the top 5 things to do, one of them is go to the Point Loma tide pools. And there's nothing there. And everybody's like, oh, they're digging through you, and there's nothing there.
You should ask them for your money back.
Well, granted, it's a beautiful vista and it's a hallowed, beautiful place, but
No, I hear you.
and they have a big sign. They have a big sign. Tide pools. You know what I'm saying? I told him. I said in my 2013, 14, 15, I would have went up there with paint and wrote dead tide pools, but I'm the kinder, gentler, softer Kevin Blanche now.
Next year, you got to get a temporary sticker and put in potholes.
Yeah, and so, right there, because it says tide pool parking when you walk in there, and I told Peter, I said, I need to write in red letters, dead tide pool parking. Because that's what it is. They're deader than... Well,
So what time was the tide today, Kevin?
low tide was at 2:30, and I just barely had got here, so...
So 3:30 tomorrow, yeah. 3:30 tomorrow.
3:30.
Yeah.
3:30 tomorrow and 4:30, but I'll get them. I'll get
That's
out
what
there again tomorrow, and I'll get it.
Well, they're getting lower every day now, right?
Yeah, it's because the full moon cycle just started. It was -1, supposed to be -1.4. I don't think it only probably went negative maybe 1. See, here's the thing with the moon cycle, and I'm so good at this, been doing this for so many years. It's not just about the moon cycle and the prediction on the tide pool. A lot of it has to do with the current flow, and which is unpredictable. You can't predict it. So it didn't go nearly as low as it was supposed to today. The next 2
Kevin,
days is supposed to be...
the beaches, the sand on those beaches is made up of clam shells, oyster shells, scallop shells, snail shells, little necks, manillas,
sure.
but they're not there.
The
They're not there, but the sand is. It's just...
Yeah, so I call it the ribbon. And so you walk along the ribbon in the morning, the ribbon, and you see the shells, the snails, and it's the canary, the sand dollars, and that's the ribbon. The ribbon is where the high tide stops. The high tide will leave a ribbon there of the light. And I'm so good at this. I've been at this for so long. I can look at that ribbon. That ribbon has disappeared. It doesn't even really exist anymore. You can't even smell the ocean down here anymore.
Wow. Holy cow.
I mean, it's that sterile and that dead. It's just, it's sickening, And here I am, 62 years old, with a replaced aortic valve for cancer, doing this dirty work, sleeping in a sleeping bag on the fucking beach. After all these years, and that's what that dude said. He said, none of the establishment is set forth. I said, no, and it blows my mind.
It's madness,
that they're still going to tote this line. I said it just like this to him. You tell me, 3, 4 cold, and he says, well, it's obvious it's the worst nuclear disaster in human history by many times. And I said, that's right. I said, tell me this. So you think there's no byproduct from that? And you work here? And I said, I'm here to tell you where you work it. And he says, no, I agree. This has to be the byproduct of that. It collapsed in 2012. That's a ranger that's worked there 20-something years. Every day.
Yeah.
That's what he said to me today. And before, he wouldn't even kind of talk to me. I'd say, hey, how you doing, blah, blah. They all know me because I've been doing this forever. It's the same people. And they know who I am.
Right, that's right, yeah.
And so before, 3, 4 years ago, it's hi, don't want to hear anything from me. He brought it up to me. So he's coming out of denial.
I say that to people whenever I run into resistance. Oh, you're still in denial, are you? Okay, it's all good, man. I wish I could.
Yeah.
I wish I could go back and be in denial sometimes.
Yeah, I wish I could live in Santa Claus fairy tale Unicornville too. But when the doctor looks you right in the eyes and tells you got 2 months to live with cancer, you come out of that place real quick.
Yeah,
you get into the real world real fast. But people are willing to live in this fantasy. That everything's okay. It's just like water quality down here. You should see these beaches. I've never seen them so packed. I've been here my whole life.
What I'm seeing lately with the nuclear industry is a lot of posturing, but actual no meat to it. There's no way for them to do the things they're saying. They don't have the skill anymore, the manpower, or the resources, or the supply chains.
They just said they don't care about the skill or the manpower to build anything. They haven't for that years. They get the pork up front from the government.
That's right.
So they're posturing for just more pork. So they just like the Bill Gates thing, the new scale thing, the SMR.
It's desperation,
They get the money. Well, it's not even desperation. They get the money up front. They have no intention of building anything. But when you get free money up front and under Price Anderson, you know how to pay back.
No checks and balances, yeah.
Yeah, they get the money up front.
And
So
the
it's
watchdog
like
is a captured regulatory agency.
right, the nuclear rallying cheerleaders, and so, and Congress keeps flooding money to this cartel, and so, just like, again, New Scale, SMR, Idaho National Lab, which Utah's funding, look at these grants they get from the feds every day. There was another one dished out freaking yesterday, another $140 million. And so they get the money, and that's what they're up to with all this propaganda all over the internet.
Yeah,
Hanford
Hanford alone wants another $677 billion.
Oh my God, I could write a whole book on that pork factory from hell. And when they say it's clean, and too cheap to meter, just the Hanford dynamic alone, how many trillions of dollars they've sucked.
Did they say they can clean it in 300 years or something? It'll be clean again. That's just absurd to suggest, though, right? Even 300 years.
Yeah, right. But it's free money, and these guys all make a lot.
Absurd money.
I mean, these people that are in the nuclear industry, they go into this for money. They make huge money. All this.
Well,
people
it's so much money. One of the contractors at Hanford 2 years ago got a $55 million fine for fraud. They didn't get fired. They got a $55 million fine. They said, oh, yeah, that's okay. Let's get back to work. It's just they steal so much it means nothing to them, right?
Yeah.
So we'll get you check in again tomorrow, Kevin?
I'll get out there again tomorrow. Yeah.
We'll check in again tomorrow. I'll call you around I'll call you around the same time. So people can donate at your website.
Yeah.
On your YouTube channel, they can find links and under your video, Kevin.
Yeah, there's a PayPal and a GoFundMe link.
Okay, on your YouTube page. Anywhere else?
Yeah.
Anywhere else you want people to go?
No, that's it, right there.
Okay, good stuff. We'll talk to you tomorrow night, Kevin.
All right. Thanks, Dana.
God bless, my
bye.
friend. Good luck. Appreciate it. Says Kevin Blanche, Ground Zero. The Fukushima nuclear meltdown wasteland, and he said that they reported they found one of those little tiny skinny starfish. There's no color on the beach whatsoever, he said. Nothing. No color. We got James calling in. Hi, James. Hang on. Are you going on microphone? Too late.
Yeah.
It's James Lucid. Hi, James. How are you, sir?
Audio. Can you hear me?
I can. So yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm just so blown away. I just have to share a few things from the night. I mean, this is just so incredible. I grew up in California. And John in the chat was talking about how he went on field trips, and it just totally dawned on me. I'm like, oh my God, like, so did I. Like, I remember going on these field trips to the Russian River up in Northern California.
Right on. Okay.
And the biodiversity, I recall, was just so vivid. It was so amazing. As a kid, seeing, I remember that the counselors, the teachers, whatever, they're all concerned. Don't wander off too far, but as a kid, you're seeing all the life all around you. You're so curious. You want to poke your finger in the sea urchin, they tell you not to touch anything.
Yeah, it was impossible not to come in contact with stuff. There's so much, right?
It was just so ubiquitous. It was everywhere.
Yeah. You couldn't. Go ahead.
And I just recall this time in I've been living on the East Coast for a long time, but I had to go down to San Diego for training back in 2012. And I was already aware of Fukushima. I'm not clearly attuned to where I'm at now, but yeah, I remember we had some time off or whatever. There's a few guys that we went on this training with. We went over to the coast. And, I just said, hey, I want to chill out on this rock, overlooking the ocean. They went out and did their own thing and everything. And, I'm kind of observing people around me. You've got these people, they're kind of oblivious, they're just diving into the ocean, these
Yeah.
tall cliffs or whatever. You're like,
Sure.
man, you think to yourself, like, if you're at the wrong angle, you're paralyzed for life.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, scary. But it was paradise. It really was, right? Go ahead, James. I'm sorry.
Right. Oh, they're having fun, right? Whatever. But I was sitting on this rock by myself, just looking at the ocean, just trying to contemplate all the life out there. And I think about the time I finished that thought, something caught my eye. And I look, and I see this tiny little crab. And it's walking up to me, and it's got its claw up, and it's looking at me. And I just get this impression from it that it's going to die soon.
Wow.
And it's like telling me kind of in a way like, hey, remember me.
Wow.
And I can't tell you just how emotional years later after running into your material and all the work Kevin's done and thinking back at that moment,
Yes.
that little crab.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, like, I wonder if that I wasn't really making that up in my head.
I had similar feelings too when I was on the coastline. Quite a lot too. I'm glad you brought that up. Keep going, James.
No, that's it. I mean, basically, that's the whole thing. I mean,
It's reality.
It's hard to grapple with that.
Reality was setting in, and when you look back on it, after experiencing it, see, and that's my big thing was, I experienced it. I used to have to wander through all the species to get up to a tree to tie on my beach line pre-Fukushima, right? And it was always scary at low tide compared to high tide. You'd come in a little boat, tie onto a tree, and get back out to your big boat. But at low tide, you had to try to make your way up through all the species, and you could slip and hurt yourself. Typically, once or twice a week, you would slip and hurt yourself. No matter who you were, you would slip and hurt yourself because you couldn't avoid the life, see? And you would feel guilty trying to do it because you would be stepping on creatures. And so when I went out on the expeditions, there was nothing. The only color on the beach was my little doggy. That was it. There was no other colors on the beaches. And I just remember just what the hell how is this even possible, you know? And so, yeah, no, I hear you, James. Okay, my friend. Anything else?
Yeah, let me let you go. I just wanted to share. That's all I wanted to share, but thank you for showing up. This is great.
Yeah, no, thank you, James. Good stuff, my friend.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
God bless.
All right, bye-bye.
That's James Lou said. James in the comments section right now. And so, like he's saying, he had vivid memories of being in that environment, and then because like a lot of people, they take it for granted. They might never make it to the coastline to understand the species, right? They might never get that opportunity to wrap their mind around the reality of the species. And a lot of the people in the nuclear industry are the same way, where they don't understand this. They don't really appreciate this. Now, if they go to my website, they're going to be confronted with this stuff. I can't ignore it. And I feel an obligation to speak out for the species that have been exterminated. That I was a commercial diver, so I used to work under the ocean for 6 hours a day. And so I lived in the environment, see? And to see all of them gone, the entire coastline, and then year after year to actually experience that, it was just the most bizarre thing imaginable. And I had a big record of them on my site, but they took down my main site last year with 10 years of documentation, all the research and expeditions in a nice package, all of a sudden was just removed in a fit of rage at me by lobbyists on YouTube while I was out counting insects last year, and we discovered the spiders were missing out of the forest, and other researchers that happened to come along from Nova Scotia was telling us the same thing up there. YouTube took my channel down with no strikes no warning, no dialogue whatsoever, and left me out in the middle of the woods. And if it wasn't for anonymous donation, we'd probably be still out there today. That has over the years have helped us out on a number of occasions in a big way. It stepped up again. Well, I was in the middle of nowhere with no way, 400 miles away from home last year. It was really something, isn't it? Because people didn't know what the hell was going on. I just disappeared right out of the blue, and they didn't understand that was, if you're going to do it to me, that was the perfect time to yank away my support when I was out in the middle of the woods 400 kilometers away. All the species are exterminated is what we're seeing. It repeated the research year after year. All of these pictures were pictures before and after that I took. The after pictures, and they're the authentic before pictures. Let's get back into the story. And you got to realize it spent years and years, just decades, dumping it into the ocean. The meltdowns in Japan, 3% of the land in Fukushima, not the other prefectures, just Fukushima prefecture. The food was banned in 14 prefectures by 55 countries. So if you have a gas, oil, or coal plant breakdown, you're not going to ban the food from almost half the country. So to come out and claim that, claiming about the footprint was the distraction, see? If your coal plant breaks down, you're not going to run away and leave your communities and your businesses and your schools and graveyards behind. If nuclear breaks down, you are. You're not going to run away and leave all your animals and pets behind, but if nuclear breaks down, you are. Who knows how many millions of drums they just dumped in the earth that'll rust out right away. Everything runs downhill into the rivers and carries it out into the Pacific, and it destroys for millions of years. Gas, oil, and coal don't have these emissions. You're being hoodwinked on this planet by a monolithic, prolific, a zombie organization known as nuclear. It's a zombie organization. They have no emotions. They're 100% zombies. The material footprint of a nuclear energy is far smaller than fossil fuel power is on par. If your coal and oil and gas plants break down, you're not going to get pregnant women to decontaminate. Imagine using pregnant women. Only the nuclear industry could go that low, trust me. Mining, uranium processing, and plant constructions operations. U.S. bans agricultural fishery products from 14 prefectures. If a gas, oil, and coal plant breaks down, you're not going to do something like that, are you? The biggest contributor to the environmental impact of nuclear is fuel pools. They're hemorrhaging radiation 24 hours a day. And they're all almost all of them are surrounded by farms. The farms suck up the radiation all day long, and then they're exported out to your shops and your supermarkets and everything else. That's on purpose. Coal, oil, and gas, it wouldn't matter. Nuclear, it's genocide machine. So if your coal, oil, when they were producing coal, oil, and gas, they weren't out blowing up all the beautiful oases on the planet and then radiating it permanently for millions of years. The Marshall Islands, Bikini Atolls, is over 1 million square kilometers is radioactive hot zone. Well, you're talking about 1 million square miles of the ocean where all the migratory birds and fish and animals and mammals are a lot of going to pass through, or the nurseries. These, like Christmas Island, the French Polynesian Islands, the Marshall Islands, were these incredible, unbelievable, unimaginable paradises, true paradises. The nuclear industry destroyed that for millions of years. Just that on its own merit, how does nuclear ever look anybody or anything in the eye again? But with all the nuclear power plants that we're looking at, most of them are surrounded by farms. That's not an accident. That's an agenda. All the fuel pools are hemorrhaging in 440 reactor buildings. Each reactor building has 2 fuel pools. Now, that's not counting all the experimental reactors. The fuel pools got decades of reactor cores that are still splitting the atoms. So instead of powering 1 million homes per reactor core, it's hemorrhaging into your food chain. Your supermarkets have been compromised. It's the biggest breach of academic science in human history. The nuclear lab employees at these weapons of mass destruction, Los Alamos National Laboratory, in Los Alamos National Laboratory, they had 967 people working at the lab since 1996, applied for and been denied compensation for cancer, almost 1,000. And 800 people have been approved for cancer, getting cancer from the workplace. Literally everybody there got cancer. Japan's safety standards and radiation levels for children are unconscionable. You're not going to see, like if a gas plant breaks down or a coal plant breaks down or oil power plant breaks down, you're not going to see the safety standards on coal, oil, and gas emissions for children are unconscionable headlines. You're not going to hide the results. They put 3,000 Geiger counters in a single community. It's a big community to trick the people into staying there, and the Geiger counters don't work, and they only measure in unisieverts. The ultimate insult. You got to measure the atomic decays per second. Beckles. Fukushima children not grown in weight. Average weight increases down 75%. Some children are only gained 1 pound in a year. You're not going to have those attributes if your gas, oil, and coal plant breaks down. 6 in 10 Fukushima children tested got diabetes. We're expecting diabetes in children from Fukushima. You're not going to have that kind of headline if your gas, coal, and oil plant breaks down. So, to be pro-nuclear is to be anti-life on planet Earth of all species. But the children are the most vulnerable, and the female populations are the most vulnerable. We have to protect the female population at all costs from this despicable, bizarre death cult known as the nuclear industry. Children's health problem increasing, incurable stomach aches, chest pains, nosebleeds that don't stop, diarrhea. Senior scientists, irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram. You're never going to see a headline like that talking about coal, oil, or gas emissions or carbon under any circumstances. Children bleeding from the nostrils, skin diseases, cardiovascular diseases. Radioactive cesium causing holes in the hearts of children. You're not going to see headlines like this for coal, oil, and gas emissions, period. How is it that anybody on the entire planet can ignore this? How does that actually work? Doctor, more and more often children complain of circulatory disturbances, tiredness, dizziness after Fukushima. If your coal, oil, and gas plant breaks down, are you going to give 80,000 children Geiger counters and keep them there? They're not even Geiger counters, they're dosimeters. You have to send them away to universities so the university students can study them like lab rats, which is what they are. Rather than move them out of harm's way, they kept them there. How can you forgive an industry like that? How does that actually work? How do you rationalize that? Japanese medical experts deeply concerned about children's radiation exposure. 51% of the kids contaminated with cesium at the Fukushima hospital, indicating high-level gamma rays on their clothes. This is absurdness. It's 100% absurdness. See, my video last night after 12 hours was 6 seconds longer than it was. Every one of my videos after 12 hours gets an extra 6 or 7 seconds. Every video. Exactly 12 hours later. Then the comments will also show up at 12 hours. Imagine how evil they are to do that on every one of my videos to me. There's an incredible disconnect that nobody matters on they're so self-centered, nobody matters on them. Let's check that video from last night. Ooh. Let me get that up here. Hang on. So we had 1 hour, 48 minutes, 57 seconds last night. And currently we got... Anytime you're ready, computer. What do we got tonight here? We got 1 hour 49.06. And what did we have before? 1 hour 45. 149. I'm sorry. 57. And tonight we got 148.57. Yeah, 148.57. And now we got, last night's video is 149.06. So it's 9 seconds longer. And that happens 12 hours after the video is posted. We got a poll tonight. That was pretty awesome. We had 2 calls tonight. That was amazing. We went on the line for over an hour and we only got 24 thumbs up. That's absurd and small. We're getting spammed. We only got 31 votes, which is extraordinary, by the way. Small. 87% of the people says, now, the study says that nuclear footprint is only 20% of coal, 23% of oil, and 35% of natural gas. Is nuclear power footprint larger than what they're claiming? Of course it is. It's absurd to suggest it's small. Worse than radioactive rain after Fukushima, fallout was suspended near the Earth's surface. Gamma shines, X-rays, neutron bursts, and you have gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas pulsing energy at the speed of light, where the little creatures and insects and animals are too. There's only one outcome from that in increments over a few years, is extermination. After Fukushima, they were using Alice in Wonderland to convince the victims that nuclear was safe, when it's the very last thing that's safe, particularly in Japan, a country prone to earthquakes and volcanoes and tsunamis. Inhuman, inexcusable acts as many children and adults are under observation while living with not coal, gas, or oil emissions, but radioactive contamination. Don't be chicken, the mayor tells the parents who are concerned that children are eating radioactive lunches because they're not worried about coal, oil, or gas emissions, see? Children playing on sports fields with radiation doses of 5,000 microsieverts per hour. And they got thousands of these in the no-go zone, which they refuse to evacuate. And they don't work. And they're in unisievers on top of that. It's a despicable betrayal to do that to the victims. Woman from Fukushima, it's like they're in a gas chamber. Children are breathing radiation every moment. Well, the whole country, almost most of the planet now is in that environment. But imagine how bad it is in these places where they didn't evacuate the children. Because that's what nuclear scientists and academics do. They don't evacuate the children. They refuse to do it. Radiation and health specialists. Children over 11 becquerels a kilogram start to see heart problems. Do you know any idea how tiny that amount they're talking about is? And if that tiny amount is going to affect children, imagine what tiny amount it takes to affect the insects and the bacteria and the fungus and the birds and the little tiny creatures. A becquerel a kilogram, a half a becquerel a kilogram. Because it's pulse and energy at the speed of light. Government from Fukushima, the disgusting, it's hard to call these people governments. They're more of what's the proper word for the government of Fukushima? Besides human trash. Claiming it's less than a stomach x-ray of radiation per day. So please come visit the nuclear wasteland. Children can even go outside. And the reason they say that, because for the first year they weren't allowed to go outside. They wouldn't evacuate them, but they're not allowed to go outside. They're allowed to go to school, go back home. Imagine how sick and demented and sadistic you are to leave people in that environment. Imagine how disconnected you really are to support that industry. Imagine what they would do if they were in positions of authorities over your children or anybody else's. Fukushima worker were kamikazes. You won't hear that at a coal plant, oil plant, or gas plant, will you? The public needs to realize there's a very real danger. That's the official picture of the building right there. That was 3 years later they claimed it looked like this. Of course it can't look like that, but that's the official picture, and that's the official picture. I can't tell the difference. Can you tell the difference? Columbia medical professor inhaling just one hot particle can cause cancer. Each of these bags is 100,000 becquerel hot particles per kilogram. So the people that are working there can't avoid breathing, ingesting it, absorbing it. The Japan government drastically reduced allowable levels of radiation in food. It was 500 becquerels per kilogram. See, if you have a gas plant, oil plant, or a coal plant breakdown, you're not going to have to set limits on food. You're not supposed to eat any food with man-made anthropogenic radiation in it. To come out and do a study to promote nuclear, claim that it has a tiny footprint, it's too much. It's too evil. Is there any reason to be that evil? They got capsules there, and a lot of them, with over 55 million curies of radiation. And then claiming that that's more radiation than was released by Chernobyl. Again, this industry can't help but lie, eh? All it can do is lie. Another 300 years or so, we should get it. So think about the footprint of each nuclear power plant on the marine life. Here's the different ways that a typical nuclear power plant kills a creature. This one is based on Indian Point. The facilities kill more than 17 billion fish annually. 17 billion. In New York and another 9 billion in New Jersey. The National Marine Fisheries Service has found that the once-through cooling systems are vacuuming up trillions of newly hatched fish and destroying them in the heat exchangers. And there's strong evidence of decline in the fish stocks along the entire northeast Atlantic seaboard is due more to the destruction of those baby fish than the overfishing of the adults by the commercial industry. The Indian power plant on the Hudson River sucks in 2.5 billion gallons of water daily. Each glass has 1 billion creatures, eggs, and larvae, and kills about 2 billion juvenile and mature fish a year in the screens. Right, so you got all these different ways that a single power plant exterminates, not counting radiation, of course. The NRC estimated more than 300 billion baby fish are killed each year when they're sucked into the intake pipes. I'm freaked out that they build these things in prime farmland, and it's not an accident. They're not building them in farmland, majority of them by accident. If you take into account the radiation they're murdering everybody within the hospitals worldwide, you really start to appreciate how evil nuclear actually is. 50 years after Santa Susana, analysts of a 5-year study by a panel of independent scientists convened years after the Santa Susana nuclear meltdown, spit out, which is in one sense appropriate, in the other sense not, up to, but not including, 460 times more radioactive fallout than 3 Mile Island. And in 3 Mile Island, they admitted 2 million people got irradiated, but they claimed it was like watching color television for an extra year. Of course, these got nothing to do with each other, but that's what the disgusting, despicable, revolting academics had published. Environmental behavior of radioactive particles and transfers to animals. It's not just the transfer to animals, it's the radiating of the entire environment with constant pulsing of gammas, X-rays, neutrons, betas. It's shocking, really. They're not stupid. They know exactly what they're doing on top of that. They tell the lie because they're not stupid. The lies are proof they're not stupid. See? Risk of radiation exposures to children and their mothers are exceptional, folks. Proton radiation-induced cancer. When you get chemo, you might get rid of one tumor, but now in a couple of years you'll have 6 or 7 other ones. Late effects of radiation prime the brain. Microenvironment for accelerated tumor growth. Like if I pulled up the studies that I do sometimes, I have a folder there on hospitals, what they're doing to you, and what the results of it is. There's no way you can support nuclear. Factors influence the transfer of radionuclides in agricultural food chains. Well, first is direct radioactive fallout. Direct. Then there's decades of reactor fallout. But how bizarre to have all these farms around each nuclear power plant. What an incredible coincidence. What a bizarre coincidence. I'll never buy a bottle of rapeseed oil again, ever, under any circumstances, after seeing that picture. Fukushima nuke report was so shocking we decided to treat it as if it didn't exist. If your coal, oil, or gas plants break down, do you think you're going to see a headline like that? If your coal, oil, or gas plant break down, are you going to take 200,000 staff and move 300 miles away? Are you going to start making plans like that if your coal, gas, and oil plant breaks down? If your coal, gas, and oil plant breaks down, is the fire going to tunnel down into the earth, hit some water, and detonate and crack the earth open, and that the steam that's coming out of the ground at 4 points, these are lethal doses. You 1 hour there, you'll die 2 weeks times. But in that environment of the steam, you're dying that day. They ran away and left. This person would have died that same day. Spraying regions. That's the worst job you can get. And in a paper suit to add insult to death. The industry is actually insane. They really are. There's such a disconnect of what the human experience is. They have no concept. That's the only reason they get hired. The disgusting company known as United Nations. They're just a company. That happens to be 195 militaries, rapists, and murderers. We wouldn't expect to see health effects in the victims or children. Imagine saying something like that. Imagine scientists saying it's the duty of the scientific community to reduce the public's fear and anxiety about dirty bombs. Claiming there's no health danger from 876,000 microsievers a year. By the way, you don't measure radioactive fallout in microsievers. You measure it in atomic decays and atoms, physical atoms. 35.8% of Fukushima children have thyroid tumors. 13,646 out of 40,000. Pre-Fukushima was 1 to 2 per million. That's because they had 54 nuclear power plants. These are catastrophic numbers. That's equal to 358,000 out of a million children when you scale it up. Top UN radiation official. Top UN radiation official. The top guy. Not expected to have any impacts on health. It's surreal. Surreal that these people, their children growing up under monsters are going to be just like them. So it's not just cancer. Low doses of radiation causes heart diseases and strokes, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. There's 1,800 illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. It's not just cancers. TEPCO paid for the creation of a blacklist of actors and musicians. So if your coal, oil, and gas plant breaks down, you think you're going to see a headline like that? Japan's worst-case scenario assumes significant public exposure by the end of March the 12th because of pressure in Reactor 1. And they were right. Unfortunately, multiple reactors detonated. The whole industry is just, it needs to be taken over by an authority that's not going to be compromised immediately. These are a threat to every species for infinity down the road. Child's risk of cancer from radiation 10 to 100 times higher. You're not going to see connotations like that for coal, gas, or oil plants breaking down, are you? Every amount of radiation increases your risk of cancer. There's no safe levels. The IAEA admitted on June 2nd, 2011, for just a few seconds, that there's no safe levels of radiation, that the standards are based on natural, not man-made, not anthropogenic. The ultimate betrayal, isn't it? Expert on CNN, Fukushima will end very, very badly worldwide. Fukushima, I mean, that's a real accurate statement right there. Fukushima will end very, very, very badly. This was a 16-day model from France. 16 days. So at the end of the 16 days, almost the entire planet is covered in an invisible plume of radiation. Gas, oil, and coal emissions don't do that, by the way. The fable that gas, oil, and coal, carbon, which everything needs to exist, that carbon is causing global warming is absurd. This causes global warming because it pulses energy every second for millions of years. That's global warming. Gas, oil, and coal emissions don't have those attributes. If your gas, oil, and coal plant breaks down, are you going to see headlines like those 60 and older should be prepared to die at your gas plant? Or those 60 and older should be prepared to die at your coal plant? Or those 60 and older should be prepared to die at your oil plants? No. If your nuclear power plant breaks down, those 60 and older should be prepared to die. Not nuclear academics, not nuclear companies, not nuclear students, not nuclear volunteers from nuclear power plants. No. Those 60 and older, the people that built the country. It shows its incredible contempt for everything and everybody. For everything. The material footprint of nuclear energy is far smaller than fossil fuel. In your dreams, nuclear impact is 20% that of coal, 23% of that of oil, and 35% that of natural gas. Nuclear is more, 100 times more than each of them. On a good day, on a bad day, I should say. Nuclear is the most carbon-intensive thing in human history. On top of that, every facet of nuclear, it needs the best of the best, nothing but the best of the best. It's compatible to that of renewables like solar, making nuclear power not just a low carbon energy source, but a low resource energy source. They built 291 gigawatts of renewables last year, wind and solar mostly. That's equal to 333 full-size nuclear power plants worth of renewables. 333 in the 12-month period. None of it's toxic, nothing. But every facet of nuclear is toxic. And it's toxic to everything with replicating cells. Nuclear impact is 20% of that of coal, oil, and gas, says the lunatics. So this is the actual study here. Life cycle resource use of nuclear power generation, considering total material requirement. But it didn't. Did it? Or anything close to it. Total material requirement. The total material requirement coefficient of nuclear power generation is lower than that bubble gum and your children farting and toothpicks left out on the counter all night. Oh, Dana, they got a scale to show it, Dana. Look at the crazies. See, the problem with that is The despicable, disgusting media will take that now and start regurgitating that narrative. The universities will come out and support that 100%. Radioactive cleanup at Idaho National Site is working. Billions and billions of dollars trying to clean up the aquifers that they poisoned all the fresh water. All these laboratories, so-called nuclear laboratories, Los Alamos and everything else, are built on the biggest aquifers in America. And some of these are in the world. My apologies. I had a scratchy little throat there tonight again. That's the way she rolls, man. And Driva Bay, former Soviet Union nuclear submarine base, fuel exchange, nuclear reactor core exchange. So they just, not only did Boris, or what was it, Gorbachev rather, not only did, because I was thinking of Boris, the monster, Johnson from United Kingdom for a second, my apologies. Gorbachev signed a piece of paper that dissolved the country. Rather than quit his job and let somebody else fix it, he signed a piece of paper because he was the head of the nuclear monster down there at the time, right? He signed a piece of paper that dissolved the country. But what does that even mean? It means you dissolved all the patents of the country, and all the pensions of the countries, except for his. Like, if just La Hague in France and Sellafield in the United Kingdom has contaminated the entire Arctic, let alone the Atlantic. Gas, oil, and coal don't have these attributes at all. Like, you're not going to do studies of stillbirths among the offsprings of male coal plant workers. No, you're going to do that for Sellafield nuclear plant workers. Child cancer around nuclear fuel reprocessing plants. They actually produced another study that blamed it on the flu. Another study blamed it on population mixing. This is a nuclear wasteland we're talking about on top of that. Cumbria, surrounded by farms, and they had a mixed oxide fuel meltdown in the 50s, in 57. They're still hemorrhaging 8 million liters of incredibly brutal radiation into the Atlantic Ocean every day. Not even trying to stop it. Not even trying to deal with it. The same thing with West Valley, New York. You take the nuclear bomb testing. The Soviets' bomb was equal, just a single bomb, the bomba or whatever they called it, their biggest bomb of the former Soviet Union, was equal to 3,800 Hiroshimas going off at the one time. 3,800 Hiroshima 14 kiloton bombs going off at the same time. Worth of radiation too. The Castle Bravo, just a single Castle Bravo in the Bikini Atolls, was equal to 1,000 Hiroshimas. So that's equal to two countries firing 2,500 Hiroshima bombs at each other. That's a nuclear war, see? Each of them is a nuclear war. Castle Bravo is equal to 500. Two countries firing 500 Hiroshima bombs at each other. And Soviet Union Castle, or the 50 kiloton bomba, was equal to 3,800 nuclear weapons going off at the same time. 3,800 nuclear bombs going off at the same time. Radioactive debris covered the whole planet, not just 7,000 square miles. Like the industry has 80 years of being monsters, so they have inbreeding, and then their children gets the job. They interbreed, their children get the job. This has been going on for a few generations. The current generation doesn't understand they're even human. They really don't. They see themselves as gods. What they done to Australia, the nuclear industry went to Australia, detonated over 700 dirty bombs where they wrapped uranium and plutonium in conventional weapons, waited for the wind to blow across the country, detonated them, and they done the same thing in Maralinga and Montebello in Australia, where they waited for the wind to blow across the country, and then they detonated their nuclear and thermonuclear weapons. I think it's striking how evil they actually are. The secondary sex ratio in Italy, there was a study, I show it lots of times, I'm not going to show it tonight, that suggests that weapons testing, which is an actual nuclear war, it's the same bombs, the same radioactive fallout, had changed the sex ratio of all humans worldwide. More males than females. You can't do that without changing the sex ratio of all the species too. Gas, oil, and coal don't have those emissions. I think my voice is just going to give up the ghost. The Kosaib disaster from Nanami, that's an endless disaster, by the way. What the British done to the veterans, how they left them to rot and die of illnesses in their children, so they can study them like lab rats. That was part of the experiment, was not to give them health care. The world's riskiest nuclear waste sites. The pools, they got pools there for 40, 50 years. They don't even know what's in it. All the pools are hemorrhaging radiation all day, every day. These pools are, everything in the pool is still splitting the atoms. No containment. And these are surrounded by farms. It's surreal that you would have that scenario right there. Multiple emission points and a nuclear mixed oxide fuel meltdown in 57, still ongoing. Hemorrhaging, all the fuel pools hemorrhaging radiation into the environment. Why would you grow food in that environment of all places? How do you get that evil? How do you become that disconnected? How do you get that hateful? 500 miles circumference, they dumped all the milk and everything else. But just for a while till you stop paying attention. If you look at Rocky Flats, what they done at Rocky Flats when they made all the plutonium triggers. Again, Hanford, $677 billion more they want. They probably spent that at least already. Billion. Imagine what they could have done with that for storage, energy storage, or for geothermal, or tidal energy, or pumped hydro, compressed air storage, or wind or solar. $677 billion would have solved all their problems, right? You had 18,000 dumps in the Arctic. Freighters loaded, freighters loaded with reactor cores scuttled. It was all kept secret. This academic study, like we're talking about tonight, this is a study that claims that the nuclear submarine with a reactor cores and nuclear missiles on board won't breach for 1,000 years. Like in 100 years, there'll be no metal left, just the fuel sitting there. If you're still on the planet, look. If you have an EPM from the sun, all nuclear plants worldwide will melt down at the same time. Coal, oil, and gas don't have those problems. Mortality among the veterans who participated at the above-ground nuclear weapons test. The list, and trust me, The list is there's so many facets to this story I won't get to tonight. I would have to do at least 6, 7, 8, 9 shows to cover all of the harm the industry does. And I'm probably going to be missing quite a bit even then that I'm not aware of. And let me tell you something, I'm pretty aware. Bloody throat. I apologize. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I thought that if I brought in a cup of tea, it would work, right? Help lather the throat. I do got a rough voice anyway, but maybe I'm just getting old, Dana. That could be too, Dana. You can't keep up with it, eh? How bizarre this industry actually is. Donneray, which is a fuel reprocessing site in the United Kingdom, they say they'll have that restored to normal in about 300 years, give or take a couple of thousand. But no one's going to be there to check. None of us will be around to find out if they're true or not. There's 300 years of hemorrhaging into the environment. What's really interesting is you don't see nuclear scientists or nuclear academics or these people who done the studies at the nuclear meltdown. It's just the homeless, the destitute, the migrants, the victims who don't speak the language there. Not nuclear students, not nuclear scientists, not nuclear universities, not nuclear companies. You know, they closed down 54 nuclear power plants in Japan after the tsunami. Not one person from those 54 nuclear plants volunteered to go to Fukushima. Not one. And not one from any other nuclear plant worldwide volunteered to go to Fukushima to help out. The downwinders is the entire country. But it never stops at just the country is the problem, right? Radiation doesn't respect the borders. In 1986, a Russian submarine with 27 nuclear missiles sank and exploded. Exploded. Soviet Union detonated a nuclear bomb to put out a burning gas well. They were actually going to use nuclear bombs. They were so insane back then. They understood the radioactive fallout perfectly back then too. They were so savage, they wanted to use nuclear bombs for road construction, for digging harbors, you name it. You can't actually make it up. They actually used a nuclear weapon to put out a gas well fire because they're crazies. Westinghouse Waltz mill test reactor melts down. So did the SL-1 Santa Susana. Many experimental reactors had melted down that they managed to hide on top of that. What they done to Christmas Island, what they done to the French Polynesians, what they done to the Marshall Islands, these three incredible, wonderful, unimaginably beautiful paradises, was they destroyed it forever. This arrogance, this hubris, pompous, self-centered idiots destroyed everything they can touch. It was a pristine place. The military was like, well, we can't have paradises on our planet. That's crazy. Let's blow the shit out of that. When you look at all the research expeditions that I've done from Vancouver, British Columbia, all the way to Alaska, year after year after year, 100% extinction event. It's 100% extinction event. Total strip. The entire coastline is completely stripped. The species never came back, and we repeated it year after year. I went out there year after year after year, and I got the shit kicked out of me 4 to 5 months a year. Just trying to fund this operation still makes me sick to my guts. Trying to keep everything working. I was ran into the ground trying to keep this operation so that we can get out there and find out the truth. And the truth, it haunts me and will haunt me for the rest of my life. And if anybody's got common sense, it'll haunt them for the rest of their lives too. How can we sit in silence and let an industry do this? And do you think they're going to give up being evil? Does anybody really think the nuclear industry, woo, we got away with it, we better be good from here on out? No, they just turned into demons. They never stopped growing food in the nuclear wasteland. They're shipping it worldwide. And the people that created that study that we're talking about tonight, I disrespect you, and your family and your friends should disrespect you too. You're an absolute embarrassment to the human species. You're just terrible, horrific scum.
Hey Zoe, a little too rough out there.
You still go find a place to
few
hide
waves
away.
right here.
I always try to go into the best
I don't want to
spots.
stay around here very long.
There was nothing easy about all the research
You see that
expeditions that I
fucker's
was
out there
doing.
breaking.
I don't know how many days. So the people that created the study, you're actually demons. You're actually demons to suggest that nuclear impact is 20% of coal, 23% of oil, and 35% of liquid natural gas power plants. You're actually demons to suggest that. You're the definition of everything that's wrong with this planet. And I disrespect you for it. Parents should go to jail for life for not drowning you in a bucket of vomit when you were born, as far as I'm concerned. You're parasites. The world will never forget you, and it won't be in a good way. How bad did we get spammed tonight? I wonder. They've been spamming us pretty regular this last week. This is really unusual. They can't handle the poll, eh? Poll is freaking them out for some reason. Is nuclear power footprint larger than 20% of coal, 23% of oil, 35% of natural gas? Of course it is. It's a footprint that never goes away for millions of years, that pulses energy every second, heating the planet up forever. It's a perpetual misery machine. All the fuel is split in the atom, perpetual disease factories. And it is what it is. It's evil. So we're going to close that poll. That was a good poll. I see we didn't get any thumbs up tonight, hardly. 31, hardly any votes. They censored us big time tonight for some reason. Thanks, Timber. Chelsea. Hi, Chelsea. Peaceware. Alberta. James Lucid. By the way, James donated 123 last night, Canadian. Thank you, James. I actually went and bought a helmet because my other helmet was 12 years old. And every time you take it off, it tears my ears. Some of my ears are so floppy, I gotta hide them all the time. So I went and bought a second-hand helmet, and it was like that's probably the 6th or 7th one that I tested. And so I'm super happy to finally get rid of the other helmet. And I wouldn't even give it to somebody. It's that bad. My other helmet is so terrible, I wouldn't give it to anybody. It's just a terrible helmet. And, it was good. I used it for over 12 years, but Dana Nasana, hi Dana. Thank you. Thinker, John Shiflett, hi John. Thinker, good night everybody. Peaceware, Richard. See if I get my voice back enough to shout out for everybody. And who else we got here? I got Albert, Human Love. Good night, everybody. Have a great night. There was a false alarm in Seabrook Nuclear Power Station. I was going to cover it tonight, but I had to cover this study a certain way, and we had to bring Kevin on to find out about the tide pools. And so tomorrow night we got just news story after news. We got two 24-hour news cycles to catch up on. Yeah, we human love, solidarity. New York City released a PSA for New York City for a potential nuclear attack. I actually played the video clip last night on the show. At the very beginning of my show yesterday. That one was censored pretty heavy, I noticed. Because the lobbyists now got the keys to YouTube. And so we're censored constantly. I don't know what to do to clear up. My throat gets sore after talking for a couple of hours. When I'm doing the news all day, I'm yelling at it, so that doesn't help, I'm sure. Like, you bastards, I'll get you tonight, you bastard. When I'm doing the news. One of these days, I'm just going to do like an 8-hour show where I'm going through the news cycles. And I'm reading through the news cycles where I'm highlighting everything. It's actually pretty funny, you know. It'd probably be a good laugh for sure, because I'll say stuff I normally won't say during the show because I'm just reading it for the first time. You yellow belly scumbags. I'll get up and stomp around for a few minutes, go back and start highlighting stuff. Jeff Poor. We're almost through. We're going backwards tonight. Don Vincent, up through the names instead of down. My eyesight's failing me tonight for some reason. It's because I stuck my finger in it 5 or 6 times, Dana. Oh, there, that's a bit better. Stephen Gadd. Right, Stephen was talking about New Hampshire nuclear power plant sent out a false alarm. There was another one a week and a half ago that done it. They would never use the alarm for a real one, so it was probably a real release. See? And there's the protocol for setting off. Hang on here. The protocol to set off a siren, not just anybody can go flick the siren on, okay? So it was most likely a real release. They panicked when they heard the siren and came out with a cover story. But there's a big, huge chain of commands before the siren can go off. Right? You have to follow a protocol before you can actually turn that siren on. So it was most likely Seabrook nuclear plant. We'll cover it tomorrow night. Most likely had emissions. And there was another plant that had emissions into a river, into a pond. I think it's a pond. We're going to cover tomorrow night. It was awesome. It was awesome. We had James Lucy called in tonight. So that's always great when we hear from the people that are around all the time, because they're tuned in. And then Kevin Blanche is on the beach. We'll hear from Kevin tomorrow night. John Curtis, we're almost up through all the names. The Wise Person. I'll come back to the most recent comments in these moments. Chelsea. Well, we had lots of people here tonight. Okay, let's come back to the most recent comments. We'll say goodnight. We'll figure it out. I think I got everybody this time for a switch. Yeah, I pretty well got everybody. Oh, Michael Allport. Andrew B. CFINSTR. See, I knew there was a few people. There always seems to be a few people that I miss for some reason. So if I don't go back up through the names after, I always seem to miss a few people. So it's great that I was able to catch that. Adam the Mushroom, yeah. Colette's out there, I bet you. Colette S. Good night, Colette. And Obsolete Optics is going to be out there prowling. Swanee D will be there in the morning. And anybody else that I forgot, my apologies. I'm only human. If you made it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. We only got 33. And censored like crazy. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. There you go. My voice clears up at the very end. Not really. It'll be gone again in a second. Have a great night. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Take care, folks. Yeah, good night, folks. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great one.